We got a big news cycle this week, and we're going to break it down. I'm Nico Fideli.
And I'm Brittany Fideli.
And this is For the Republic.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to another episode of For the Republic. We're so happy you're here. If you're watching today's episode, smash that like button and share it with all your friends. If you're listening, leave us a 5-star review. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon to be notified when a new episode drops every Sunday night at 7 p.m. So we got a big news cycle this week, and we're going to break it down for you. What do we got first?
So our first story is about the DOJ unleashing the FBI on parents who attend school board meetings. So parents lately have been attending school board meetings and becoming a lot more vocal about either the curriculum or content that's in the school or things that are being taught by teachers to their kids that they find inappropriate. A lot of the information or a lot of the content is sexually explicit. It includes a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily want a teacher to educate your child on, something that maybe you'd want to educate them on yourself, or let them discover once they hit adulthood and are mature, not children.
Yeah.
But parents are coming to these school board meetings. There's been some issues with critical race theory and things like that, and so they've come and they've been vocal about their disgust with whatever the curriculum is.
So what is the FBI going to investigate?
Well, I guess the FBI is looking for parents who cause a disruption or cause a threat against the school board or the school administration. So they're looking to basically label these parents as somewhat of like a domestic terrorist, and then prevent them from being able to go to future meetings. And I'm not sure what all that would prevent them from in the future as being labeled as a domestic terrorist. Yeah. So the real question is like, what counts as a threat against the school board? So I mean, if a parent so much as says like, you're going to answer for what you're teaching our kids. Yeah. Does that count as a threat against the school board or the administration? So there's not a lot of clarity as to what actually counts as a threat or as a disturbance against the school board in these meetings. But we're seeing a lot of this, a lot of parents coming out and being very vocal about their children's education lately. Yeah.
So do you think that this is a way of, because from what I understand, this was kind of pushed by the teachers union. So is this their way of trying to protect their agenda and the left in being ingrained in our public school system?
Right. So I think the school union, the teachers union, is pretty much trying to prevent the teachers from being limited on what they can teach. So they want to be able to open the curriculum up to whatever they happen to want to teach at the time, whether it's critical race theory or whether it's explicit sexual education. They want to have books and things in the library that kids are able to access that would be considered raunchy or considered too much above their heads. They want to be able to involve all of those things in the school and not be limited to what they have. So I think they're fighting back or pushing for this mostly because first off, they don't want parents involved in the school curriculum. Right. I think a lot of them try to keep parents out of what their kids are being taught. But then once parents are aware of it, they don't want parents to have an opinion or a say on what their kids are taught. In fact, I can't even remember who it was, but somebody, and you might remember, came out this week and said that it's not the parent's job to know what their kids are being taught, that's the teacher's job.
Oh, yeah. I did hear something about that. I'm not sure who said that, though.
Yeah, I can't remember. There's somebody high in the Board of Education, but anyways, the point being that they want kind of an unlimited platform on what they can teach your children or teach their students. So they don't want parents to have a say in that. Yeah,
that's very interesting. I think that this, my personal opinion, is an abuse of power from our Department of Justice. I don't think that the FBI has any jurisdiction in investigating any of this because, I mean, they're the Federal Bureau Investigative Service. So, I mean, like, it's in the name that they're supposed to handle federal cases. So, I mean, like, even if there was a group of parents that said that maybe in, like, we'll say Wisconsin or something, that actually committed a crime in a in a meeting. Like, I mean, the FBI wouldn't be involved in that. Like
Right. So I think that's where the label of domestic terrorism comes in, because then they can get the FBI involved by using the words domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that comes from.
I think that what they're trying to do is connect that, like, this is some sort of movement that all the parents are connected, which, I mean, yes, we're united in this front that we want to protect our school system, but these are individual cases of our parents, speaking on behalf of their kids and wanting control of what their kids are being taught. So that kind of, I want to shift the focus just a little bit, using the story as kind of a crutch. What are the dangers that lie when we allow our teachers to teach whatever they want, or we allow our institutions to kind of crack down on parents who are against certain things being taught in the school?
I think actually right now what we're seeing in the educational system is the result of that.
Yeah.
Because that's really been happening for the last several decades, where teachers have been able to teach pretty much unbridled. They don't really have a limitation to what they're able to teach. And there's been a lot of stuff, especially over the last few years, that's come out, particularly concerning sexual education, but going as young as kindergarten, that children are being educated on things like self-pleasure and, same parent households and things like that. Things that in kindergarten you don't really would not think about naturally. It's not something that
it's almost indoctrinating, not teaching.
Right. And then you're seeing that pushed all the way up into the college level, where college students are being indoctrinated to believe liberal ideas and liberal thinking, and often punished when their thinking goes against the mainstream, or when their thinking goes against their college professors' beliefs or things like that. That's something that even when I was in college, I was seeing. So, that's been happening for the last several years. And I think that right now what we see currently, where teachers are teaching all of these things that most parents find inappropriate, whether they speak up about it or not, I think that's the result of this kind of atmosphere.
Yeah. So do you think that this stunt by the DOJ and the FBI, do you think that it'll deter parents from attending these meetings?
I actually think it might embolden parents. I think it might do the opposite. I think, or at least I hope that that's going to be the opposite. It's going to be the opposite effect. I think you're going to see parents saying that's first off, it's not your job to limit our ability to speak on behalf of our kids and our students. And I think if it goes any further and you actually start to see retaliation, I think you're going to see an even bigger spike in homeschooling, which you've already seen a lot of lately due to COVID mandates. But I think that you might see a bigger spike in homeschooling because of this. And it's really sad, because the public education system, it does have a lot of great things to offer, like sports and things that kids can't necessarily access being homeschooled. But I definitely, support homeschooling. As a homeschooler myself.
Yeah. And, I've been somebody who was on the other side of that, where I had, most of my social experiences were because of public school. So I was always adamant about, sending our future kids to public school. But, with the climate right now, and, do I want to actually go through the headaches and the hassles of knowing every little thing that my teacher teaches my kid, because it could be something that, is not only something I don't agree with, but something that is like contrary to what is deemed appropriate in society. I mean, we're kind of pushing the line on some things here that, there's in the media cycle a couple of weeks ago, there was a parent who talked about a couple of books that were in the library for, elementary students to read, and they had explicit pictures. They had pictures of,
I believe it was supposed to be like a middle schooler's sexual awakening.
Yeah, sexual awakening.
I believe is what the theme of the book was.
Yeah.
So I guess the content was quite explicit.
Yeah.
From my understanding, it didn't quite cross the lines of pornographic, but the description was quite.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there was I can't exactly remember. So I mean, feel free to correct me or put down in the comment what it actually was. But I think there was another book, and the other book was talking about a student having a sexual experience with somebody who was older, like somebody who what?
I believe that's actually the same book.
Oh, is it the same book?
I believe that was actually
Yeah.
the same book. It was the author came out and defended it, but actually wanted to remain like anonymous in his defense.
How
because
convenient.
he was getting like death threats and stuff from
Yeah.
parents. So it was quite a big thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that the whole controversy, there were two separate books, but the biggest one being like a middle schooler's sexual awakening.
Yeah.
I don't understand why anybody would think that it's okay for a middle schooler to have a sexual awakening.
Yeah.
That's a pretty young age to have any kind of awakening.
And I mean,
So-
if that's something that you want to teach your kid in your household, I guess like more power to you. But like, how does anybody justify that being involved in school? Like, how is that an educational thing?
It almost feels like sexual abuse, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
To be exposing kids to things that they're not ready for, and and there are some people who are going to advocate and say like, well, what they're being exposed to by their peers is much worse or much crazier, and to some extent that might be the case, but the fact of the matter is peer exposure to things is different than adult exposure to things.
Yeah.
Adults exposing kids to things that they're not ready for, or that they're not mature enough to understand, or not mature enough to handle, or giving them a false sense of maturity, like because we're teaching you about this, you're ready to handle a sexual awakening in middle school.
Right.
It's just inappropriate. So there's always going to be things that happen amongst peers that you would hate to see happen. But the fact of the matter is it's a lot different situation when you have somebody actually educating your child on these matters. So
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see what happens with this, but I encourage you, if you're parents and you're sending your kids to public school, that you are involved in you take advantage of every single resource that you have. I know that there's tools that you can use, like there's pamphlets out there that you can read from when you go to your next meeting if you're kind of a shy person or whatever. I mean, I encourage you to kind of stand up, use the tools that you have, and speak out for what you believe in and what you think is appropriate and inappropriate in school. So, I mean, I definitely don't think that parents should, be by the wayside or kind of be silent in this. I think there's strength in numbers, and I don't think that the FBI is going to put every single parent who speaks up against school on a domestic terrorist list. I think that there's going to be some sort of repercussion for this.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So our next story that we have that was made rounds in the media cycle is another approval poll from Joe Biden, and it has dropped. The national poll average is 38%.
Approval average.
Average. So
Right.
so this is shocking numbers. Well, I mean, not shocking if you're paying attention, but shocking in the fact that there hasn't really been a president under 40% in quite some time.
I'm actually kind of shocked it took him this long to get to 38%.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's the shocker. That he just, this is courtesy of Fox News, stands just at 38% with a disapproval at 53%. That's down from 42% to 50% approval/disapproval rating for Biden in a survey last month. So just from last month, he went from 42% approval to 38%, with 50% disapproval to 53%. So
Right.
So we're trending in the wrong direction here for the president.
At this rate, if with him dropping numbers that fast, maybe by Christmas he'll be into the teens. Can we get that far? That probably not that fast.
Yeah. But what do you think are some of the reasons why we're continuing to see Biden's approval rating tank?
I mean, I think if you want to know details, you've got to watch the first 13 episodes of this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
there you go. Nice plug.
To sum it up, I think pretty much everything that's happened in the last, I would say 5 or 6 months have just been astronomically disappointing. The administration has been dishonest on multiple subjects and multiple occasions. They refuse to answer questions. They refuse to be truthful about what's going on. But you have the border crisis. You have the crisis in Afghanistan. You have the fact that Joe Biden campaigned on kicking COVID-19's butt, and how President Trump needed to answer, now former President Trump needed to answer for the number of deaths that had occurred on his watch due to COVID-19. And we've actually seen almost as many deaths at this point, 10 months into the year, not even quite 10 months into the year, with Biden as president, as we did during the entire COVID pandemic under Trump. So I think that all of those things are really coming to bite him in the back. The fact that he has on multiple occasions thrown his own people, his own country under the bus. He's been very very dishonest. So I think all of those things are kind of leading to the approval rating. I think the fact that there really hasn't been a pause in bad news or a mishandling of situations in the last few months. I mean, it's been thing after thing after thing after thing. It hasn't really calmed down. And if you think back any, which people don't like to do, but if you think back any, I can't think of a week recently in the last few months that we've had that's just been like a calm week where we haven't had like a major disaster or a major flub from the White House.
Yeah, so many blunders coming from this administration in all fronts. You know, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's domestic, whether it's taxes, whether it's economics, everything. Everything has just been a blunder for this administration. It seems that this administration can't really do anything right. I mean, not as far as like, if you're on the left side or the right side, but it seems like whatever they try to accomplish, they don't do it correctly ever.
Right.
It seems like there's always a blunder. And you see that really profoundly even within the Democratic Party. So I think it was Monday that Biden called for a meeting and they talked about the bills, the infrastructure bill and that big spending bill. And he kind of shot both of them dead in the water when he was trying to help. There's some moderate Democrats that have come out and said Biden has really killed these bills for us. Just by the way he talked about it, by the way he, I guess advertised it, if you will, lack of a better term. But it really put a blunder on what the Democrat Party wanted to see go forward. And so not only are we not probably going to see this spending bill, thank God, which is huge, but it might have jeopardized the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think the fact that if you disagree with this administration at all, Joe Biden has been very quick to make you an enemy of the country or of your state or of the administration itself. So, I mean, even just this week, one of the representatives, and her name escapes me, but she was not in support of the spending bill, the $3.5 trillion spending bill, and she was followed into the bathroom by a couple people, an illegal alien and some I don't know, crazy person or whatever. They followed her into the bathroom and were harassing her about not approving the spending bill. And Joe Biden said that it was part of the process.
Wow.
So not even sticking up for her and saying this is unacceptable. It doesn't matter where you stand or what side of politics you stand on. It's not acceptable to be harassed. And I believe, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe she's a Democratic representative. And Peter Doocy actually grilled Psaki on this week and said, what's the deal? And she said, it's part of the process. And he said, has Joe Biden ever been followed into the bathroom and harassed about a spending bill or so something to that effect? So, but it just no defense for her at all. So he's just been very quick. If you don't agree with this administration and you don't agree with their policies or their procedures, then he's very quick to label you an enemy of the state. So
and I think that's another problem. It's gonna come back to bite his own base, his own fan base, his own constituents, his own
Luckily
party.
For us, all the sane people out there. Luckily for all of us.
They're gonna end up imploding on themselves. Like the Democrat Party was so unified because they had a common enemy of Trump, and once that enemy kind of has been diffused, for now, it seems that whenever there's some stirring in the water, it's like an explosion. It's like a nuclear war. So, I mean, there's this infrastructure bill, though it's expensive, was a bipartisan bill. Both sides wanted to get something done as far as infrastructure. And it seems like that this bill is probably going to be dead in the water because it was attached to this big spending bill.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the spending bill has just a lot of craziness and a lot of stuff that they're just unwinding. In fact, I've seen a few people like on Facebook and things say, since they don't know what's all contained in this 2,000-page document, let's slip in their term limits for Congress. So I thought that was pretty funny. But like even to the effect of the fines that that OSHA would hand out to private sector businesses who violate the COVID-19 vaccination policy. So like if you have over 100 employees, you're required or mandated to have your employees vaccinated. And that's something that has been handed down from the White House. So they actually slipped into that $3.5 trillion bill that if you actually violate the terms, it was a $14,000 fine. They've raised it from $14,000 to $70,000 up to $700,000 per violation. However serious they deem the violation. So up to $700,000 per violation. So it's like not even a cap, not even like $700,000 total that you can be fined.
What makes it like a $70,000 offense compared to a $700,000 offense?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if your unvaccinated person is a Biden voter, it's probably a $70,000.
Okay.
And
if you're a minority and you're not vaccinated, it's $70,000. But if you're a white cisgender male, then
so I don't even know because I don't think that was detailed. I don't think it was detailed in there, but it would be up to OSHA, I guess, to decide the seriousness of the violation and then be able to hand down the fine. So like just crazy stuff like that was slipped into this bill that's coming out, and people are like, oh my gosh, there's no way we want this passed, or at least people who are paying attention, I should say, don't want it passed. So
so Biden continuing to tank. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what his approval rating is next week. But moving on for now, this story comes courtesy of the Daily Wire, covering the school shooter in Texas. So there was a school shooting in Texas. An 18-year-old high school student in Texas was accused of gunning down multiple people at his school. He was released from jail on bail. I think it was actually within 24 hours.
Yeah, I think it was the next day.
So he was released after posting a $75,000 bail. So those who haven't really followed this story, those who have just heard about the school shooting, this shooting is kind of an anomaly when it comes to school shootings. So this was not a student who decided that he was going to take a gun to school and purposely intend to kill people. Right. So from the story, the story is, I'll just read it here. The New York Post reported, footage on social media allegedly showed the suspect getting into an altercation during class with another student that escalated to gunfire. The fight was broken up, and the two students calmed down, but then the suspect pulled out a firearm from his orange backpack and fired several shots that struck 3 people. So here we have a student who got into an altercation, obviously not justifying bringing a gun to school. Obviously, that's a big no-no. But this was somebody that brought a gun to school that probably wasn't intending on using it. From what I've heard on social media, and I can't verify this, so I mean, if you guys want to, I encourage you guys to do your own research, because I feel like when this stuff comes out, we can't really trust the media cycle anymore to give us the actual facts. So I encourage you guys to do your own research. Reach out to people that you may know in the area or whatever. But I read a comment on Facebook, I believe, about this, and someone supposedly from Texas saying that he knows parents from this school. So it's like a he said, like kind of like down the chain kind of thing. But supposedly this student was bullied. So like he had multiple altercations with students, and he felt like he couldn't defend himself. Again, not justifying bringing a gun to school. I mean, that obviously is not the right thing. But you can see how kind of this would play out from a judge's perspective. So a judge's job at this point in time is to deem whether or not he's going to be a violent criminal. If this is somebody that's going to be a repeat offender, then obviously you would have no bail. But he was not charged with attempted murder or anything like that. He was charged with 3 accounts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So
right. So it doesn't even have to be a he said she said situation, because the suspect's attorney actually confirmed that the kid had been bullied in school.
Oh, okay. So the attorney, I did not know that. The attorney did confirm this. Okay.
Yeah. So the attorney, the suspect's attorney did confirm this, that he had been bullied in school, and I believe actually his sister came out and said that they had even had a hard time getting him to go to school recently because the situation had gotten so bad. So it's really unfortunate that he felt kind of cornered or backed into this position. I think it really goes to speak for why you should be talking about your kid or talking to your kids about this every day, you know, talking to your kids about what's going on at school, paying attention to the changes in their countenance, paying attention to changes in their behaviors and things like that, because a lot of times kids and teenagers, they don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about what's going on. And I think that sometimes they just don't realize that their parents are there and available for them. They don't, you know, they just don't recognize that. So something to definitely talk to your kids about, because you're going to get bullied always, you know, in every situation in life. There's always going to be somebody who's making fun of you or putting you down or treating you bad, whether it's in a workplace or whether it's socially or whether it's at school. It doesn't matter. That's always going to happen. There's always going to be those situations. So talking to kids about how to deal with those things and how to properly process them in a way that doesn't lead to them getting in trouble or them suffering consequences. So.
So I mean, I wanted to bring this story up and kind of share exactly what happened, because hopefully it could enlighten some people's opinions, because I've seen a lot of people that have automatically gone the route that, oh, this kid, you know, fired a gun at people in school, he should not have bail. You know, equating it to some sort of like Columbine or something like that, where I think like this is a different situation. It seemed that the judge made a decision that this kid is not an immediate threat to society, and that you know, he's not going to commit more violent crimes from what he could see, that this was a one-time incident. And it's not like he was scot-free, right? I mean, even though he made bail, he has a GPS system on his ankle. He can't leave his house, and he's subjected to regular alcohol and drug testing. So, I mean, he's going to be monitored 24/7. Right. So this is just until
he'll, I'm sure, end up with a record. He'll be on probation, if not serve some jail time. So, you know, he's definitely going to, and is already facing consequences for his actions. Right. You know, so definitely something it's an unfortunate situation that happened in the first place, but, you know, talk to your kids. Talk to your kids about what's going on at school. You know, even if you have to be pushy about it, you know, talk to your kids about what's going on at school, because they're not always just going to come to you with their issues and their problems. They're not always going to just bring it up. So.
Yeah. Before we move on, I do want to point out some of the problems I have with this. I do think that $75,000 is kind of a ridiculously low bail, especially considering somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse, who was really fired in self-defense. Like, it's proven on video that he fired his rifle in self-defense. The videos are widely available. This is kind of pretty much common knowledge at this point. When he worked in Kenosha, and he was, you know, after work, he wanted to make sure that people could peacefully protest and that they were safe from people who are rioting. And he was actually going to go to, I don't know if it was his workplace or a different workplace, but his intention, he had a med kit and everything like that. His intention was to, you know, kind of be there in case anybody needed anything, not planning on using his firearm. And he used his firearm in strictly self-defense. And his bail was $2 million. Right. So, I mean, like, you can see that the media cycle is kind of what dictates it almost like muddies a judge's perspective or a judge's opinion. You know, whatever the media cycle is. And those who don't know, this student at Texas, he was a black kid. So, I mean, like, that's why I don't think is as prevalent as somebody if it was a white student who decided
doesn't quite fit the agenda.
Doesn't fit the agenda for the narrative for the media right now. So that's kind of why I think that this situation was handled the way it was. So I definitely. I'm fine with him meeting that bail, but I think just $75,000 was just a little too low, especially if you equate it to somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse, in my opinion. So sometimes
too, the financial situation of a person might affect the bail. So if the kid's family was, like, you know, multimillionaires, the bail probably would have been set much higher. So that can also have an effect on the situation. Obviously, I don't think that had an effect on the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. I think he was just railroaded because of what was going on at the time. So, but I definitely agree with you there. Yeah.
So another story we have that is making the rounds, and you might not have heard this because it was kind of suppressed on social media. A young mom died from the COVID vaccine, and her obituary was actually removed from social media because the family called this out by name, saying that she passed away from the COVID-19 vaccine.
Right, it was listed listed right in her obituary.
Yeah, so she decided, this young mom, I think she was 37, 38, one of the two, I can't remember exactly, But she died from the COVID-19 vaccine complications, and she got the vaccine because she was worried about the government mandate.
Yeah, right. So I believe she was mandated. I'm not sure if she fell up under the federal mandate
37.
or if she fell up under one of the health care mandates or whatever, but she fell up under some sort of mandate to receive the vaccine in order to keep her job. And so she had not planned on getting it, but in order to save her job, she did. And then she developed some blood clotting complications as a result of this. And this is not just her family that's saying this. This is actually Washington state health officials that have confirmed that she died from complications from the vaccine.
Yeah, so this comes from The Blaze. A portion of the obituary read that Jessica Berg Wilson, 37 of Seattle, Washington, passed away unexpectedly September 7th, 2021 from COVID-19 vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocythemia. I don't know. It's VITT. So if you want to look that up, I don't know how to pronounce that. Surrounded by her loving family. So it's right in the obituary. It says that she passed away from COVID-19 vaccine complications. So, I mean, this is a crazy story, I think, right?
Right. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I think that it kind of goes along with what a lot of people have been saying, that there are people who are dying of complications and they're just not being labeled actual COVID-19 vaccination deaths. So we're seeing a lot of that there. I've even seen some reports that say it's as high as 80,000 people have died from complications.
Holy
now,
cow.
Obviously, that's unconfirmed because so many state health officials refuse to confirm some of the deaths as COVID-19 vaccine deaths. So we have to, acknowledge that's unconfirmed according to health officials. But that's the number that I've seen floating around recently, that they believe it's as high as that. And they also, interestingly enough to point out, if you actually died from a complication of receiving the COVID-19 vaccine within the first 14 days, most places won't label your death as a vaccinated death. They label you as an unvaccinated death because you're not considered fully vaccinated until 14 days after receiving the second shot. Yeah. So that's something else to point out. You could die within the first 14 days and they would label you as an unvaccinated death.
And I don't know when she's specifically got the vaccine, but I can't imagine it would have been much farther out from 14 days,
and
right?
It might just be that in this case, they made an exception because they didn't have a way to get out of it. It could just be that they didn't have anything else to point to. Perfectly healthy woman dying of this blood clotting situation. So
So I
can't confirm why the Washington health officials actually did label this a COVID-19 vaccination death, but they actually did.
But it seems like convenient that if you die within 14 days of a vaccine, then it's unvaccinated. When that's probably when you would die from a vaccine if you were going to.
Correct. Right.
So it's kind of a little bit convenient there. COVID. I guess repercussions have been in the media, not necessarily the pandemic itself, but a lot of stories. Another one, Rochester man, just right in our backyard, 75-year-old New York man died last weekend after hospital refused to give him the drug Ivermectin in the last-ditch effort to save his life. So this is a man that was suffering from COVID, and this is courtesy of the Daily Wire. Apparently, he had a court order to receive ivermectin, and the hospital refused to treat him.
Right. So he was actually a vaccinated individual. He had a severe case of COVID, and he and his family petitioned the hospital to prescribe him ivermectin, which people, if they talk about on YouTube, often have been taken down because of their support for ivermectin. But there's been a lot of support with this in the healthcare system from people who have worked with the drug. It's a drug that's been prescribed for like 20 years now for people for internal parasites. It's also prescribed for horses for internal parasites. So that's where this has come from. A lot of people say we're not talking
horse
about
medication.
Yeah, it's horse medication. We're not talking about vets here. We're talking about actual doctors. So, or which is crazy to me because a vet has to be in school for 8 years or something.
Yeah.
But the point being that this has been safely prescribed for the last 20 years in the U.S. and they've seen a lot of success with ivermectin treating COVID patients so that they are out of the hospital quicker or don't have to be hospitalized at all. So his family petitioned the hospital to have him treated with ivermectin. They denied the petition, so they took it to court, and a judge approved the treatment and approved him being prescribed this, and the hospital still refused to prescribe it. They refused to submit to the court
So what's
order.
the deal with this? Like, this can't be just a political stunt, right? I mean, like, so a judge is saying that you can give them this drug. That kind of alleviates them from any repercussion, right? Because a judge court orders them. So if the hospital gives him this drug and then he dies from this drug, the hospital doesn't really have any repercussions for that. But the hospital refuses anyway. What gives? What the heck?
So crazy enough, there's been a lot of pushback from the government on ivermectin. So from the research that I've done, some of the healthcare officials that I've listened to, from what I understand, the government has actually strongly encouraged doctors and hospitals not to prescribe ivermectin. They don't want it being used in cases for COVID. They don't want it being used at all. And in fact, it's gotten so bad that if you find a doctor who will prescribe ivermectin, it's actually hard to find a pharmacy who will fulfill the prescription.
Wow.
So it's gotten really bad. They've actually even from reports, unconfirmed government reports, they've actually encouraged the maker or the drug company that makes ivermectin to not make it. And there's been some money thrown around, and so there's a lot of conspiracy.
So there's a monetary incentive to not make ivermectin.
Right. So there's a lot of conspiracy here. There's a lot of people, like, especially like the people who are very, anti-COVID vaccine, COVID-19 vaccines. A lot of people talking about the fact that this medication is being denied to people in America for healthcare because the government does not want it used to treat COVID-19, because what happens is that it has such a good effect in treating COVID-19 that people are hesitant to get vaccinated because they know they can be treated with ivermectin. Now, in the same respect, the government has actually been sending ivermectin into third world countries to help treat their cases of COVID. So Mexico has had a lot of success.
It's good enough for India, but it's not good enough for America.
Right. So yes, the government's actually spent millions of dollars sending this into third world countries. So they've sent it into third world countries. Mexico has had a lot of success with it. India has almost exclusively treated with this because they actually can't afford the COVID-19 vaccines.
Yeah.
So unlike here in America, where our government is spending like just millions of dollars vaccinating every person that they possibly can, they might even vaccinate your dog next, who knows? But they can't actually afford to do that in India. So India has almost exclusively treated with ivermectin, and they've seen such great results in it. So this is an unfortunate situation, and there's actually been other cases where judges have put a court order in and the person has been prescribed ivermectin and recovered very quickly from COVID-19. So we're seeing like kind of a mismatch. I'm curious to see if the family is able to sue the hospital for malpractice now because they refuse to submit to the court order.
Yeah, I was just thinking
that'll be really interesting.
So like the hospital had a way out to protect themselves, and now they decided not to take that route, and now they're subjected to maybe a lawsuit. I'm
curious also to see if the government will put any kind of protection behind them, because it's been at their insistence that ivermectin not be used in treatment of COVID patients.
So a lot of controversy surrounding ivermectin, whether or not it's safe, but it seems that it does combat COVID from what we've seen in the short term. But on the contrary, the government is not talking about other negative effects with a certain vaccine, and that is the Moderna vaccine. So several Nordic countries, including like Sweden and countries like them, have actually put a pause on Moderna because we've now seen they deem that there's been enough cases where there's heart inflammation. So this was a few months ago. I think this was in the cycle about very, very small cases about heart inflammation. But now it seems that it's happened enough where these countries decided to put a pause. So if you're 30 years or younger, you could have a risk of having heart inflammation from Moderna's vaccine.
Right. So I believe my understanding is that Sweden has paused it for anybody 30 years or younger.
Yep.
Denmark has announced something similar, that they're pausing for anybody 18 years or younger. And Finland, I believe, has followed suit of Sweden, where they were pausing it for males, 30 years and younger. So Sweden,
that's what I thought, that this was predominantly like in young men.
Right. So they're seeing it more in young men, but I have seen reports of women also suffering from the same thing, particularly young women, 18, 19, 20. So like very, very young, like the later teens and young 20s is where I've seen it a lot, but I've seen it more so in young men. So they're looking at the effects. They've had enough cases of this that they actually are linking the cause of it to the Moderna vaccine, and have decided to not allow anybody under the age, in Sweden, anyone under the age of 30, in Finland, any males under the age of 30, and then in Denmark, anyone under the age of 18. So they're just seeing a lot of these cases happening enough that they're linking it back to Moderna. Luckily for Moderna doesn't actually face any charges, at least in the U.S. The government has
they're not allowed to be sued concerning the COVID vaccine. So I mean, like,
scot-free.
The reason why we're tracking these stories, the Moderna suspension, people who pass away for not getting, medicine, and a woman who actually died from the COVID vaccine. One of the reasons why I like tracking these stories is because, not to build a case that we're anti-vax. That's not the point. I mean, I'm very pro-vaccine. I know you're pro-vaccine. If you think the COVID vaccine is best for your health, I encourage you to go down that route. I'm not going to steer you any other way. But the reason why we bring up these kinds of stories is because this is contrary to what we're being told by our government, contrary to what we're being told by the Fourth Estate, contrary to what we're being told by our politicians,
by most mainstream media,
things like that. And we want to bring these stories to light because it builds a case that we, as Americans and as a free society, should be able to choose. We should be able to make a risk assessment. And we're seeing that, vaccine's good, vaccine's good, vaccine's good, vaccine's good. We're constantly being regurgitated the same thing, that the vaccine is the answer. When there's people out there, including myself, that I'm hesitant because I don't want to have an inflamed heart. I would rather have the risk of contracting COVID-19 than to put something in my body that could potentially do damage or harm to my personal.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, these cases of myocardia, I believe is how it's pronounced. But since, I never got a medical degree, don't quote me on that. But myocardia, I believe, is how it's pronounced. This heart inflammation. In some cases, patients can recover and have no long-term effects. In other cases, patients actually have lifetime heart issues from this. So we're not talking about something that's just a small side effect that you would have to deal with for a certain period of time. It's something that you could carry with you for the rest of your life.
But still, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I mean, I'm not here to give anybody medical advice. But to me, I'm not saying it from a frightened point of view, but like, to me, it just seems like it's too much of a risk for me, for something that has
such a high survival rate.
That has a high survival rate that's going to give me maybe like flu like symptoms for a few days. Worst case scenario, maybe I get put in an IV for a day or something like that.
I mean, worst case scenario, you could die. But
well, yeah.
But I feel like in most case scenarios,
yeah, I should say. A very unlikely scenario, I could die from COVID. Yes, but I would say like the most highly, a percentage worst case scenario, I guess, like, would be that I'd be hospitalized.
I don't quite understand the English you're saying to me right now, but I do get what you're saying.
Yeah.
That in some rare cases with young people, young healthy people, that they might be hospitalized, or they might be put on some sort of treatment in the hospital. So that does happen in some cases with young people. In most cases with young healthy people, they are not hospitalized.
Right.
In some cases, they have no idea they even have COVID because it just feels like a severe cold or flu-like symptoms. So there's a lot of stuff that's been mixed up about COVID, about the vaccines and all of that. But I think it's important to talk about these things that are happening because, first off, people who are talking about it are made out to be conspiracy theorists. We're seeing now that they're not conspiracy theorists. We're seeing now that these things are actually true, that these things are actually happening. I never believed that a lot of it was conspiracy theory. I thought a lot of it had some credibility behind it that was being suppressed. But now we're seeing countries actually backing this. So it's interesting to point that out. Interesting interesting to bring it up, and I think it's important to talk about it. But actually, also in COVID news, there's a new drug, right, that they're using to treat COVID that has kind of just emerged. I believe it was developed for the flu.
Yeah, so this new drug was experimental for influenza, and it's now in phase 3 trial. We practiced this before, and I can't remember how to. Molnupiravir.
Piravir. Yes, Molnupiravir. That's what we got it.
Yeah. So this new drug is called Molnupiravir, and supposedly
Molnupiravir.
Yeah. I'll just let you say it because
Molnupiravir.
Molnupiravir. There you go. So in this phase 3 study, this is courtesy of CNBC. The study found that 7.3% of patients treated with Molnupiravir were hospitalized within 29 days. Of the patients who received a placebo, 14.1% were hospitalized or died by day 29. No deaths were reported in the patients who were given the Molnupiravir within the 29-day period, while 8 deaths were reported in the placebo-treated patients. So, with this phase 3 study, basically the takeaway is that the hospitalizations or death rate has been reduced to about 50% less with this drug. So, I mean, if this is sustainable, if this is something that can be done in a larger scale, that would be huge.
Right.
Considering that, most demographics are 98% likely to survive. If we can get that to like a 99%, so could you imagine like somebody 50, 60 has a 99 instead of a 98? That's huge. That's really good. So, I mean, if we can get there. And of course, this isn't going to be talked about by everybody because this is contrary to the agenda of the vaccines being the end all be all.
Right.
So this is just another little nugget in your corner.
Once again, it's interesting to point out that our 75-year-old man from Rochester was a vaccinated individual and died of COVID-19 complications because the hospital refused to prescribe a different kind of medication for him. Yeah. So I think that it's great that there's more medications coming out. There's more things that they're going to be able to advocate for with healthcare, and I think that the more that we're seeing results with this in unvaccinated and vaccinated people, the more these treatments are going to be widely available for people. So it's going to be kind of similar to, some people don't get the flu shot, but they can get prescribed Tamiflu. I think it's Tamiflu is the medication that treats the flu. So within, I believe it's 48 hours, because after that you can't be treated for the flu. But within 48 hours, you're able to receive Tamiflu, and that helps to lessen the symptoms and help you to recover quicker from the flu. So I'm hoping that what we'll begin to see both in vaccinated and unvaccinated people is this kind of type of medical care taking over, where you're able to be prescribed something to take care of it. Interestingly enough, actually, I can't remember where it was this week that a hospital, his system in Colorado is now refusing to do organ transplants on people who are unvaccinated. So recently, a woman who was on the transplant list for a kidney transplant was denied her kidney transplant because she was unvaccinated. And so this healthcare system in Colorado has determined that it's important that you get vaccinated because you have, I believe it's a 14% chance of catching or contracting COVID after an organ transplant. So now they're requiring all of their organ transplant recipients to
she was taken off the list.
Yes, she was taken off the list. So was notified that she was no longer qualified for an organ transplant in their medical system. And that's actually interesting to point out because we have talked about this in the past, that one of the concerns that we have is that unvaccinated people will become kind of a second-class citizen when it comes to receiving health care, that certain healthcare systems can either push back their health care or deny them health care altogether. And we actually have just seen that in Colorado this week with a woman unable to receive her kidney transplant because she was unvaccinated.
Yeah,
so
crazy things going around surrounding the vaccine.
Right.
We have one more story here about COVID, and then we'll put it to rest for this week. But this was really interesting. This comes from Times of Israel. Israel concluded a study at the end of August, I believe, August 25th, around that time, that they discovered that you are 27 times more likely to be protected with more effective natural immunity is 27% more effective than
You got
vaccine.
it.
Yeah, there we go. Wow, I couldn't get that out. So they deemed that natural immunity is 27 times more effective than the Pfizer vaccine, than getting 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine.
Right.
So, and the same study showed that vaccinated is 13 times more likely to be hospitalized than being naturally, having natural immunity. So this study is pretty interesting to me, and is kind of going along the lines of what middle of the road politicians and right leaning politicians are talking about having choice, and whether or not you should get the vaccine for your health, or whether you want to take your chances with natural immunity. And this was kind of my thing from the get-go. This is one of the main reasons why I lost my job, was because I preferred to go this route of natural immunity than to get a vaccine. That's just my personal choice. And it's starting to show that, that natural immunity is actually effective, contrary to what Fauci has been saying, contrary to what we've been seeing in the media cycle.
Right. So according to this article, people who had 2 vaccine shots had a 6-fold higher chance of getting the Delta variant than patients who had not been vaccinated but had previously contracted the coronavirus and recovered. So that's pretty interesting there, especially considering that the White House has been telling us for weeks now that the unvaccinated are actually killing the vaccinated with breakthrough cases, when it's actually now being shown that the vaccinated are 6-fold more likely to get the Delta variant than somebody who has previously recovered from COVID-19. And I think that it's also interesting to point out that these mandates don't actually take natural immunity into consideration. So if you've previously had coronavirus and you still have the antibodies in your system, it doesn't matter. You would still have to receive the COVID-19 vaccination, even though your immunity right now would naturally be more effective than the vaccine.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Follow the science.
Yeah. Follow the science. Follow the science.
So
I wonder if this is one of the angles that if this has to be brought to court, these mandates, if this is going to be one of the angles where, hey, like, natural immunity has been proven to be better, more effective than the vaccine in certain situations. Why is it that you're forcing people who have already contracted COVID to get a shot when it seems like they're more protected and they're actually spreading it less than somebody who hasn't gotten COVID but has gotten vaccine? So
it'll be interesting. Excuse me. It'll be interesting to see. Like a little hiccup there. It'll be interesting to see what really becomes of this. So yeah.
So this week on For the Entertainment, we got a couple stories. Daily Wire reported that the UK sport finds trans athletes should not compete against women. So saying that testosterone suppression does not negate the physical advantage. So this is pretty interesting. UK of all places, I think, is very surprising.
I know. That kind of shocked me. But I guess the fact that America is going so woke or broke, I think that you can't really expect anything like this to come out of our studies anytime soon, because it's woke or nothing right now. But coming out of the UK, which is, ironically enough, the UK has been very woke for the last few years. I would say probably the better part of a decade now, and they're kind of reeling in from the results of their wokeness, and now we're seeing kind of the same behavior in America. So now you're seeing the UK come out with a study that says, hey, guess what? You shouldn't allow transgendered men, people who trans from a male to a female, to compete against female athletes. And the reason being is that although they have testosterone blockers, blocking testosterone does not actually block their physical advantage, which is something that all of us sane people have been talking about for a long time. So, yes, testosterone makes a difference in the male body versus the female body, but removing testosterone or lowering testosterone levels does not negate the full physical advantage of a male to a female.
Right. I mean, like, it just take the anatomy, like if you're talking about endurance, like, the lungs are still bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have bigger muscles. I mean, so, like, the fact that, just suppressing testosterone is not the defining factor of the strength capabilities of a biological male versus a biological woman. I mean, like, this is obviously, follow the science, like we've been saying. Like, this is obviously not a fair playing field, and I think that the UK is I think they've reached an impasse saying that, okay, like enough is enough, where
Yeah.
like even though it goes
Hopefully.
it goes against what they believe politically, it also goes way past common sense that they felt like they actually had to say something about it, because I mean the UK is still a pretty predominantly, sport oriented, especially in the international community. They take their Olympic sports very seriously. They take soccer very seriously, or they call it football over there. But so like I think that seeing this infused in their sports, they're very adamant about these things. I think that as soon as it changes the culture and stirs up the pot too much, I think that's when they put a stop to it. So
Right, and I think this culture that we have in America right now, where we're encouraging transgendered men to compete against females, I think that has encouraged a lot of female athletes to stop competing. And I think that that's a shame. That it's really right now there's this culture in America that is discouraging women from being women, and that's unfortunate. So, hopefully we're going to see some results from these kind of studies coming out even more, and some sense coming back to people. I think, for time's sake here, we might want to jump to football.
Yeah.
Speaking of soccer,
yeah,
we might want to jump to football.
yeah.
So this week, the Steelers play the Broncos, and I think you guys are at our home, correct?
Yes, we are at the Steeler Stadium.
You're at
Heinz Field. That's what it is.
baby.
I almost called it Mustard Field,
Mustard, yeah.
but it's
Heinz
close.
makes ketchup too, and relish.
But yes.
Oh my gosh, I would love to just go to Heinz Field and be like, relish the field.
Yeah, relish the
Oh
field.
wow.
I thought you were gonna say I'd love to go to Heinz Field, and instead of dressing up as Steelers gear, we dress up as like mustard and ketchup.
That would be embarrassing as a fan of Pittsburgh football. I guess if I was a Broncos fan, though, I would find it hilarious.
Oh, got him. Ooh, all right. So, just so you know, ESPN said that we have a 51% chance of winning. I think the score would 21-20. I think they said
21 to 20. They think it's going to be that close, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Steelers have a 1 point advantage, so the spread is -1.
I think, to be honest with you, I think that this game really could go either way. I think that I think you've seen enough improvement. I mean, the Broncos suffered their first loss last week, but we knew it was going to be a tough game. And the fact that your quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, he was taken out of the game at halftime, correct, from an injury.
Yeah, he had a concussion. I'm just looking that up now. Actually, the Ravens, I don't know how to say Odafi?
Is it Odafi? I don't know.
Odafi?
I don't know.
Anyways, the guy that hit Teddy
names.
Bridgewater, I just saw this, got an $11,000 fine for the hit that concussed him.
Right, yeah, which is not surprising coming out of the Ravens. It's part of the reason why we can't stand them so much. But so your quarterback was taken out midway through the game. So I think, you guys definitely, if he's back to 100%, I think this game really could go either way. I don't know.
By the time people watch this, the game's already over anyway. So
yeah, I think the Steelers are having just a major O-line issue, and they're, because of that, there's just so much pressure on Ben to get rid of the ball very quickly, and he doesn't have time to make those good accurate throws like we're used to seeing out of him. So it's really unfortunate that this O-line is really holding the team back from doing any kind of work offensively.
Yeah.
The good thing going for them is that your guys' defense tends to struggle a little bit. So but your run defense looks really good, and that's going to be a problem for the Steelers, because
our pass defense is a little weak because we've had injuries in the secondary.
Correct.
But our run defense is pretty solid right now. We're still 4 overall in defense. I think, though, the deciding factor is going to be if Teddy Bridgewater plays. I don't think it'll be a competitive game if Teddy Bridgewater's not in.
No, I agree with you. I think Drew Lock just doesn't really have what it takes to be a number one quarterback right now, and I think that we've seen that with him being placed as the number 2, and we saw that last week. He was very scared on the field. Yeah. He looked very scared to be out there.
I go back to, every time I see him play, I go back to what you said when he first got injured. I think it was his collarbone or whatever. He got
shoulder or collarbone.
Collarbone. Yeah, I think it might have been his shoulder. But you said that he's never been the same, and that's exactly right. He didn't play with the tenacity, the chip on his shoulder, the the confidence.
Right.
He never
I have
got
to
that back.
Up to that point, I was actually very impressed with him. I thought that he had a lot of confidence on the field for someone so young and someone so inexperienced. And it seemed like that hit just really like scared him. And I think he's afraid to be injured to the extent of not being able to play football, so much so that he's not playing football.
Yeah.
So I think we're really seeing that out of Drew Lock. Hopefully he's able to shake out of that funk, because we have seen players really kind of tank their own careers with this same kind of mentality that they're scared to get hit again.
Yep.
So hopefully he's able to shake that off. But yeah, I think it'll be a determining factor whether Teddy Bridgewater plays. So I think it'll be if he does play, it's going to be a really competitive game, because the Steelers O-line is not very good. They don't have a good run game going on, and your run defense is great. So I think that it's going to be really hard for them to get any kind of running yards. It's probably going to be a lot of passing, and when you're doing a lot of passing, you know who to cover. So I think that it's going to be interesting, both sides of the offense there. On the other side of that, TJ Watt and
Highsmith?
No, TJ Watt is back. Yes, Highsmith is back, but TJ Watt and who's your the guy I love to always see get a sack.
Miller?
Von Miller.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm like, what is his name? TJ Watt and Von Miller have almost identical stats in sacks and tackles and things this year. The only thing that really separates them is that TJ Watt has a few more forced fumbles, a couple more forced fumbles than Von Miller does. So I think it'll be really interesting. I always love to see a Von Miller sack. Of course, I would hate to see it against my own quarterback, but I just love to see it. They're always so fierce and so ferocious. And the same with TJ Watt. I love to see a TJ Watt sack. It just energizes the whole stadium. So it'd be really interesting to see what our defenses do against these quarterbacks.
Yeah. Maybe so. A heavily defensive game, maybe. I do agree with you that there's probably going to be a lot of pass attempts. The thing I'm worried about though is that with Ben, they have been really working him, I think, way too much, considering the point of his career. I think it was I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but you guys lost the game, and he had over 50 passing attempts. And when I saw that statistic, I was like, wow, somebody his age should not be throwing the ball 50 times a game.
Right. That's why they brought on Najee Harris. That was supposed to be like our big #1 draft, because it was supposed to alleviate some of the pressure on Ben. Unfortunately, they didn't work on the O-line very well. Yeah. So what's happening is Najee Harris is not able to generate those running yards, and it's putting a lot of pressure on Ben to create all of the yardage and passing yards. I think they kind of thought if they got Najee Harris, because he was so good in college football, that he would be able to fly over the defense. And unfortunately, he hasn't developed those wings yet. Something about Red Bull doesn't actually give you wings. I don't know. But so that's really, really hurt us. So it'll be I think it's going to be an interesting game. My prediction is 24-21 Steelers.
Okay, 24-21 Steelers. I'm going to go with, man, I really, after last week's loss, it really hurt my confidence in my team. So I think the only way we can win is if we hold you guys to 10 points. So I'm going to say 13-10 Broncos.
13-10 Broncos.
13-10 Broncos.
So you're predicting a very low scoring game.
Yeah, I think a low scoring game. I think we'll see some defensive plays, maybe a couple turnovers on each side of the ball. Maybe TJ Watt get like a strip fumble or something like that, and Ben Roethlisberger throw an interception, something like that. I think that'll be a very defensive game. I think it'll come down to the wire. I honestly think that the game could be 10-10 throughout the whole thing, and then one team or the other gets a field goal at the end. I think that's kind of the atmosphere of the game. I think that's how it'll play out. Otherwise, if it's anything else, I think the Steelers will blow Broncos out of the water.
Interestingly enough, that's a pretty sime pretty similar gameplay to what we saw when we went to Denver, actually. So the last game that we saw where Steelers faced the Broncos, where we actually saw it live, I should say. It wasn't the last time we faced the Broncos, but Steelers faced Broncos in Mile High Stadium. It was a very defensive heavy game. So so good predictions. I think we are like blowing our time here with this episode. Everybody's asleep.
Everybody's asleep. football Sunday night football already started, and they're already tuned out.
It's late, man.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, you guys have a good night. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next week.